Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're really going to pop the hood and act as a specialized analytical engine to deeply dissect the topic that honestly is so frequently misunderstood. We're breaking down the strict, ongoing, and highly regulated contractual relationship that actually defines tax-exempt structures here in the United States. Relying on an anonymous expert report, we aren't just going to be scratching the surface today. Oh no, we are going to identify the core mechanisms, the rigid cause and effect relationships, and the implicit assumptions that are built right into the tax code. If you want an expert-level understanding of what it actually takes to build and maintain a tax-exempt entity, you are absolutely in the right place. Okay, let's take a quick look at our structural roadmap for the analysis. We're going to start with the mechanics of exemption, move right into the foundational structural requirements, and then examine the organizational and operational tests. After that, we'll break down the public versus private classifications and finally look at the true burden of compliance. Let's jump right in. Section 1. The mechanics of exemption. Before we do anything else, we really need to establish the baseline assumption of what this exemption actually represents, structurally speaking. We have to strip away all those emotional assumptions about charitable work and just look purely at the structural reality. So, the absolute most critical thing to grasp here is that tax-exempt status is absolutely not a permanent label. It's really not this static right you just earn once and keep forever in a drawer somewhere. Instead, you've got to view it as a mechanistic engine. And this engine requires continuous, verifiable inputs of public benefit. If you fail to provide those inputs, well, the engine suffers a total structural failure, leading to immediate revocation. The authorities actually view this as a conditional statutory privilege, fundamentally governed by a very strict logic. No continuous proof, no continued privilege. Moving on to Section 2, Foundational Structural Requirements. Let's focus in on the rigid initial inputs required by regulatory authorities. This architectural blueprint is entirely non-negotiable and requires exact precision from day one. According to our expert report, you literally cannot skip these sequential mechanisms. First up, the entity has to physically exist under state law. Second, the organizing documents must be drafted with incredibly precise, compliant language. And third, and this is a non-obvious detail that trips up a lot of people, you must acquire a federal identification number, or an EIN. Even if your organization is brand new, operates purely with volunteers, and has literally 0 employees, a federal identification number is an absolute requirement for the regulatory architecture to track the entity from its very inception. Now, this is absolutely fascinating. A profound structural constraint we see here is the Permanent Asset Dedication Clause. What this does is mandate that upon dissolution of the organization, every single one of its assets must be transferred to another exempt entity or the government. Meaning, the entity's wealth is eternally locked into the public benefit. It permanently severs any possibility of private ownership or private financial retrieval. Once the capital goes into the structure, it can never, ever legally return to private hands. It completely cements the irreversibility of this exemption contract. Furthermore, according to the experts, an entity's foundational architecture has to be exclusively restricted to one or more of these explicit categories to mathematically qualify for the privilege. You really cannot operate outside of these clearly defined lanes. The documentation must unequivocally limit the organization's existence to religious, charitable, scientific, educational, public safety, amateur sports, or the prevention of cruelty. If the core purpose deviates even a little bit, the structural integrity fails instantly. All right, Section 3, Organizational and Operational Tests. Because once you've built this framework, regulatory authorities definitely aren't just going to take your word for it. They subject the entity to a stringent, continuous, 2-part validation mechanism. This 2-part test brilliantly exposes the stark difference between what an entity claims on paper versus how it actually behaves in its day-to-day operations. The organizational test? Well, that's static. It looks purely at the legal boundaries written right into your structural blueprint. Have you included the required clauses? Have you prohibited non-exempt activities in writing? But then there's the operational test, which is totally dynamic. It's a behavioral mandate that physically evaluates your daily, ongoing actions in the real world to ensure strict alignment. And the cause and effect relationship here is just absolute. The operational test demands that your primary daily activities continuously advance your specific exempt purpose. If those behavioral outputs get imbalanced, like say you begin generating way too much unrelated business income, or you trigger a prohibited action like intervening in a political campaign, boom, the regulatory engine shuts down the exemption, and the immediate effect? The entity gets slammed with severe tax liabilities and financial penalties. This ensures the government immediately recoups the financial advantage that was granted under false behavioral pretenses, essentially punishing any deviation from that structural blueprint. Let's transition into Section 4, Public versus Private Classifications. We're looking at the financial lifeblood of the entity now, because the source of your funding directly dictates your ultimate regulatory classification. Analytically speaking, you really have to recognize the implicit assumption of guilt embedded right here. The authorities simply do not trust concentrated wealth. By default, you are legally classified as a private foundation. You are presumed to be a private, closely held entity until you can mathematically prove to the authorities that your funding comes from a broad base of public support. The burden of proof rests entirely on the organization. This cause and effect relationship is fascinating because it shows exactly how concentrated money directly causes heavier regulatory burdens. A public charity is funded by a broad base, so it gets operational flexibility and minimal tax liabilities because the public is implicitly acting as a watchdog over the funds. But a private foundation? That's funded by limited, concentrated sources, like a single family or a corporation. Because there's no public watchdog effect there, the regulatory authorities step in with intense scrutiny, strict operational rules, and specialized excise taxes that are mathematically designed to force wealth distribution and penalize risky investments. And as detailed in the expert report, proving public support is not just some one-time test. The system actually grants you a temporary grace period for the first 5 years to operate under the assumption that you will build that public base. But starting in year 6, a continuous, mathematically calculated rolling average is triggered. The authorities look at your current year, plus the previous 4 years to verify your survival as a public charity. It's an ongoing, strict mathematical equation you have to pass to maintain your operational flexibility, which systematically prevents entities from gaming the public support metric with just a single, anomalous year of broad funding. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5. The burden of compliance. Achieving this tax-exempt status is essentially signing a massive transparency contract with the government. Let's look at the intense operational burden required to maintain this. So, what is the exact cost of this exemption? Well, it requires an ongoing, non-negotiable forfeiture of your organizational privacy. You're mandated to maintain highly detailed internal financial and non-financial records. You have to submit comprehensive annual informational returns, regardless of your size, and you must provide unhindered public access to specific statutory filings. The structural rigidity scales up significantly in exchange for these tax privileges. Because keeping precise records isn't just some internal best practice, it is a legally binding public mandate. If a member of the public demands to see your initial approved exemption application, or your official regulatory determination letter, or even your last 3 years of annual returns, you are legally required to hand them over. Your financial and operational privacy is permanently sacrificed in exchange for the tax exemption. And get this, the financial burden actually begins before you're even approved. The initial user fee just to apply for this statutory privilege is mechanically tied to the historical financial footprint of the organization. The system evaluates your gross receipts strictly over a 4-year period to systematically calculate exactly how much you have to pay merely to ask for the exemption in the first place. making it a highly quantified barrier to entry. So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought as we wrap up our analysis of this expert report today. We've deconstructed the mechanics, the structural requirements, the behavioral tests, and those severe compliance burdens. Tax exemption is a heavy, continuous contract. It demands the total forfeiture of your operational privacy and forces you into strict structural rigidity. So, you really have to critically ask yourself, is the financial advantage ultimately worth the cost? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the mechanics behind the structures around us.